for more on both of those addresses, we want to turn now to ABC's political directors, no stranger to these speeches in the past. Rick Klein joins us live now from Washington. Rick, let's talk first about the President's State of the Union address. Talk to me about what we saw tonight, the tone, the presentation, the big themes. What was your takeaway from President Obama's final address?
This was a provocative speech. It wasn't about unity. It was about challenging. It was about engaging. It was about remembering what the country did to unite behind him twice before and trying to bring that spirit back to this overheated political season. And this president didn't try to rise above the politics of the moment. He joined the fray. For all intents and purposes, this was putting himself on the ballot again. This was a third term of Obama. This is saying, look, listen to what these guys are saying. That's wrong. This is what I want to do. And these are the stakes. This is the way the country is moving. There was very little acknowledgement of the fact that so much of this country isn't comfortable with the change they've seen over the last 7 years. And this president's policies aren't all that popular. He is saying that regardless of where you come from on this, this is where the country's headed. This is where we can take it. And these are the challenges that we need to accept. I thought this was a far more interesting, textured, layered, and again, provocative speech than I expected and that you typically get from a president in his final year.
Rick, I thought that another thing that we saw in that speech that was so interesting was how little applause lines and how little support there were for things that seemed to be bipartisan in their very nature, like curing cancer. You know, when he says that the United States of America should cure cancer and only part of the chamber stands up, did that surprise you at all?
Maybe I'm a veteran of too many of these to cease to be surprised anymore by the fact that so many people on the opposite side just sit on their hands during these speeches, and I think it is unfortunate. But I'll note one point that I thought was very interesting here. There was a line in the speech about the need to not divide around race or religion. Clearly a shot at Donald Trump, who talked about the ban on Muslims entering the United States. And you could see the wheels turning in Paul Ryan's head as he started to applause. He started to applause, and other Republicans in the chamber did as well. When you combine that with the Nikki Haley response, there was a not-so-subtle rebuke of the politics of division, the politics of Donald Trump in this campaign season that brought bipartisan agreement in the chamber.
And Rick, I have to ask you, because we're getting questions about it on Twitter, the Capitol behind you seems to be bouncing around a bit. Is that just your enthusiasm?
Yes, that's exactly right. When I speak, buildings move behind me, guys. You should know this by now.
It's a Rick-quake, y'all.
Yes, exactly.
It's a Rick-quake.
Big moment, but no, everything is fine. It's we're totally fine. Of course, the Capitol under construction, but maybe it's the energy from that speech, because I thought it was the engagement in this, and I think the sort of bring it on tone that the president had in this was striking to me, because he's never going to run again, but clearly his legacy is on the ballot. Clearly he's thinking about politics. Clearly he's thinking big about the course of the nation, and he is saying to the American public, you were with me before, I need you again.
Rick, you wanted swagger in this speech. You told Amna and I that that's what you were going to be looking for. Did you get it?
Yes, there was one line, you know, clear eyes and full hearts. It sounded like Friday Night Lights. It was Coach Taylor all of a sudden coming out. I did think there was swagger here, and like him or not, and keep in mind, half the country doesn't like this president right now. He's got a supreme sense of confidence about him, a supreme sense of his own place in the arc of history, and I think the way he layered that into the speech tonight to try to frame up this last year without a lot of policy proposals. There's some of that without a lot of specific critiques going back and forth. It was saying, look, this is what it means to be president. This is what it means to be an American in 2016, and this is how we engage in this moving forward. Not a lot of happy talk about unity, not a lot of false hope about bills that'll never pass. It was about, this is where we stand as a society, and this is where we need to go.
Rick, you sound almost pleasantly surprised by some of that swagger that you saw there. And actually, you mentioned earlier you're a little bit of a cynic when it comes to these things, too. But I do have to say, I kind of noticed as well a lot of the same themes that President Obama ran and first won on back in 2008 seemed to come up again. This is a guy who ran on hope and change. You heard those words again and again tonight. He talked about the need to change the political system, the need to change how Americans consume energy, the need to change the way that we do things, and of course that issue of optimism. That element kept inserting itself again and again. Is this kind of bringing his presidency full circle?
this president has talked about his time in office as a paragraph that you write in a history book. And I think this is an exclamation point. This is a punctuation mark at the end of it that he's trying to say. But realizing that the story continues, because it isn't just about voting once or twice for a president. It's about continuing that work. And I think, look, I think if there's a critique of this speech, is that he's talked about what happened in the past. He talked about what happens in the future. He did not acknowledge the very real anxiety and anger that's there in the present. That so much of this country is worried. It's not just Republicans either. You've got Democrats who are just as worried about the direction of this country, and they are scared. And there were hints at that, but this was not really speaking to that segment. I can see a big portion of the country utterly tune this out, not as happy talk, but as sort of a false bravado for American station in the world. People are just not as optimistic as this president is. So, but I think in terms of sending that chorus, instead of putting it out there, you're right. This was uniting a bunch of the themes around hope, around change that he's been talking about for 8 years, and that, of course, brought this country a remarkable degree of unity at a time where it's impossible to imagine it ever happening. There was a moment where Barack Obama was a voice of that, and I think there were reminders in this speech of how that was possible in the first place.
That is ABC Political Director Rick Klein joining us live from Washington. Rick, thanks as always.